very quick. Let's talk about Sundance rumors. Let's not talk about Sundance films yet. So,
Okay.
no secret, there's 3 finalists to take Sundance starting in 2027. Salt Lake, Park City, Boulder, Colorado, Cincinnati, Ohio. I had heard some rumors. Granted, they were from people in the Denver area, that Boulder was tipped forward. Not confirmed, obviously. It's all rumor at this point. And they certainly will not announce anything before next year's festival. You, on the other hand, have apparently heard something different.
Yeah, I heard all about Cincinnati.
Who did you hear all about Cincinnati from?
People I probably shouldn't disclose. Reputable, not necessarily directly connected with Sundance. Let's put it that way.
Okay, but not. It's not stupid that they would know.
No.
So they could be correct. You can't discount them out of hand.
Correct. So, but
did you hear why?
The money being offered.
Really?
Yeah.
It's all about the money. I'm glad this little independent film festival is now all about the money.
Yeah.
I think it's stupid. It's not Sundance. If it goes to Boulder, you could still make the argument that it's Sundance.
Yeah. No.
If it goes to Cincinnati, it's the Cincinnati Film Festival.
Yeah. No. And I agree with you. I think it would still be a mistake for them to leave.
I do too.
But I don't get to make that decision.
No, we do not. That's why we don't get paid the big bucks.
Correct.
So, let's see. Let's see what's going to happen. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. I'm Mark. That's Ryan. We're talking about Sundance. He's talking. I'm graveling still, although I am working on it. But we're going to talk about some films that we saw in common.
Yes.
During the festival, and maybe if there's some we didn't see in common, we might plug them to one another.
There's at least 2 that I'd like to
plug.
Yeah.
Or talk about. All right. Well, let's the first half of your list. We're not going to talk about them all. We don't have to talk about them all.
Yeah.
But let's talk about one, because the subject of this documentary was on site and doing press, and it's political season. And that movie would be Prime Minister, about the female Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Yeah.
From shortly before, actually, what was it, 2016, 17, up through most of the late unpleasantness of COVID.
Yeah.
And how she was 37 and rose through the ranks of her Liberal Party to become the leader of the party, and then all of a sudden finds herself as Prime Minister. And then, first off, between my tone and the fact that there's a lot of things going on in that last sentence, I may be sounding pejorative about her rise. However, the whole point of that introduction was to point out how wackadoodle parliamentary systems can get sometimes.
Sure.
Because, man, that is it's like professional high school politics, where you have the popular people not necessarily in charge, but then all of a sudden that nerdy kid from chess club finds himself vice president of the student body, and then the president steps down because he was taking performance enhancing drugs because he's a football player.
Okay. All right.
Right. You know what I mean? It's just these weird things pop up, and people that are otherwise qualified, except maybe for their age and perceived social standing, wind up in places. So it's just weird. And the parliamentary systems are weird. We don't have that in America. We have a winner take all kind of thing. And that's where we're at. So it's different if you're watching from America. However, it is an interesting documentary in the fact that Jacinda Ardern, excuse me, who is this lovely young lady who finds herself prime minister. You can't help but, as presented, and let's talk about documentaries for a second. Ryan, you'll probably agree with me that every documentary filmmaker has a slant, or 99.9% of them.
Well, I think even if you don't, yes, inevitably you do.
Okay. And two, it's about politics. Therefore, there's a slant. That being said, as watching the film, it's really good. It is a real good look at how situations arise, how decisions are considered and discarded, and then reconsidered and discarded again, and new decisions are considered, and then decisions are made and put out there and reacted to. It's whether you agree with everything New Zealand did especially during the late unpleasantness.
Yeah.
It's a really cool look at that kind of system and how you can crank public opinion, especially in a system like that, to get things done, whether they're right, wrong, or backwards, or frontwards, or upsides, or downsides. I just thought I'm a political junkie, and I love processes, whether it's a legal process or a political process. So this movie was like right in my wheelhouse. You see a lot of sausage being made.
Yes.
How did you feel about this one from a filmmaking standpoint? Obviously, we don't talk about politics per se.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But,
I thought it was fine. I don't know that it was. I thought it was a well-made documentary. Obviously, it is more in her favor. I think is the tone is more positive about her, and there's a lot of interesting things in there about, there's a whole bit about, can a woman be a mother and have a child and still run a country?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, just things that seem, a little bit ridiculous, but maybe there is a legitimate question somewhere in there. But I don't think the people who were asking those questions actually had a legitimate argument that they were actually putting forward.
No.
So.
But to be fair, that type of argument is made everywhere. Whether it's can a woman do the position? Can a pregnant woman do it? Can a woman that's marrying her baby daddy run the country through these troublesome times? Or is this guy too old to be president? Is this guy too young to be president? Does this guy have enough experience to be president? Should this guy be the CEO of this other company? I mean, those types of, and I'll say slanted questions appear everywhere, but they are more prevalent in politics.
Sure.
So, but yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I thought it was an interesting film. I mean, obviously, this goes to the a little more proactive as far as gun control. They have that moment. As far as COVID, how they responded to that, and how they responded to it again.
Right.
Which. I mean, I think it's an interesting film. I think that we just lived through a lot of it, or at least I feel like I just lived through a lot of it. So I don't know. I mean, I do think it's a good film. I think it's interesting. I think it's a nice profile of her. I think there is some, scariness in there when you have some of the more violent aspects taking their cues from America. That was kind of terrifying. But maybe not unexpected, I suppose. Yeah, I thought it was good. I don't know that I felt like it's anything that changed my life, but I also feel like it wasn't redundant, and it gave you a peek inside New Zealand's politics, which is quite frankly something that I don't know very much about.
No. Um, and it is the kind of documentary I like because it is contemporaneously shot.
Yeah.
But I also like the fact that she spends a good portion of the film reacting to notes that she made for this interview series during those times.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So you have video and audio of her during the events, and then her reacting to her discussion of that at the time
Sure.
for a different project now. So there's a lot of moving pieces. But again,
Yeah.
I'm a political junkie and I love processes. So this was, from that aspect, I really did like it. I don't agree with everything that happened anywhere, but
Yeah.
but again, I love process. I love watching that stuff. I love going, I wonder if someone's going to do X or if someone's going to ask why, what the letter Y, not why as in why are we doing it?
Yeah.
But I like that. So yeah, so it's not earth shattering except in the inevitable, was she the youngest prime minister as well, I think,
Yeah, I think so,
in
yes.
New Zealand. So there's a lot of firsts and, notable events about her, but it shouldn't be about her. It should be about what she did during her time. And it mostly is, which I appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I mean, we get a little bit of her life, but it's primarily about her political life rather than, I mean, there's obviously bits of her family life in there, but that is secondary.
yeah. So that I very much liked. So that was I watched a lot of documentaries again. I
Yeah.
think I watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Yeah,
9,
I saw a few
10
myself, so
documentaries.
yeah.
Dang, 10 documentaries. How did that happen? Um, we also both watched the Marley Matlin documentary.
Yes.
No longer, not alone anymore. Marley Matlin, not alone anymore. About how she got into acting. She won her Oscar, her life after that, up through now. Um, Another one interesting in construction in that it is almost all signed
Hmm.
with subtitles.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with subtitles, so it's just a foreign film. Um, but it is always interesting to see um, kind of a wordy documentary about a celebrity. She doesn't really sweep a lot of stuff under the rug. There's a lot
No.
of stuff in there that is not complimentary.
No. No.
Um, but I think the biggest thing about this one for me was how well it dovetailed with another documentary,
Yeah, which
also at Sundance.
unfortunately I did not see the other one, but I did. Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
Yes, that one is actually called Deaf President Now, and it's about in the '80s. I forget the exact year, so forgive me, people. Um, there was a student rebellion at Gallaudet University in Washington or Virginia, wherever it is, back in the East Coast. The only deaf university in the world.
Which is where
Um,
she attended.
which yeah, and so uh, it they named a new president, and they had three candidates: two deaf men and a non-deaf woman, and they chose the woman, and the students flipped out. They're like, "Why? The university's been in existence for 124 years. Why do we not have a deaf president yet?"
Mm.
And so, over the course of 4 or 5 days, much is heard from the deaf university. Um, in a good way. I think it's really interesting because it's told there's like 4 points of view. There's like three or four, there's like four deaf students that are all remarkably different. Um, but they all have the same goal. And then there's the administration and the board and all of this stuff. And again, so it is a political documentary at its core. But then there's a lot of process about how you select who does what and how alliances are built because the students build alliances to get to the end that they all want. Um, so I actually found that one more intriguing than the straight Marley Matlin documentary. but it is definitely worth a watch. So when it does pop up, Brian, I know you're going to want to watch it.
Yeah, I know it, and there's a little bit of that in her film.
Yeah,
It's a pretty quick, like a 2 or 3 minute um, thing that's in hers. Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I think a lot of it I knew, some of it I didn't. Some of the darker stuff I didn't know. It made some, interesting points about abuse and being young in Hollywood and having success very quickly, and how that can be a negative thing as well as a positive thing.
yep,
I mean, I did enjoy the tour of her career, because there were certain things in there that I hadn't seen, and that was nice to go. Oh, I didn't know she was in that television series, or in this or that. So that was nice.
yeah,
I liked it. It's a good portrait. She doesn't soften by, if there's something she needs to say, she says it.
yep.
And I appreciate that honesty as well. Yeah, I generally really liked it. But again, I really like her as well, and we talked about this when Coda came out. But I remember when she won the Academy Award, and it was kind of like, well, of course, deaf people can win. Because I was a kid, and what do I know? But
Right.
it's funny because I don't remember a lot of reaction to other Academy Awards, but for some reason that one does stick in my head. Um, yeah, I generally liked it, and I again, I like her, and I think that helps. I like her spirit. Um,
She's got spunk, as they used to say.
I
She's
like
got
her
lots of
sarcasm.
spunk. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
yeah,
is.
and
She is take this the way I mean it, people. She's a sassy broad.
yeah, yeah,
She is a sassy broad in the best way.
yeah.
Best way.
So
Yeah. So that one is really good, and of course, not alone anymore. We get through the end of the film where Troy Kotsur wins Best Actor
yes,
for Coda. So she's not
who
the only deaf actor.
and he's just such a. I mean, I did the offer. I didn't get to interview her, but I interviewed him, and he was so much fun. Like he just is. He was just. I mean, he's yeah. I will forever. That's one interview I will never forget, because of how unusual it was, because I
Right.
had someone translating and sign for him and whatnot, and someone, it was a kind of a strange experience, because I haven't interviewed a lot of deaf people. It was sort of like interviewing someone in a different language, which I've done a couple times where you have a translator. But nonetheless, he was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And so hard not to love the guy.
All right. You can pick the next one of the ones that we have seen. Which one do you want to talk
Uh,
about?
I don't know. What do you
We
what do
got
you what do you want?
well, I loved Perfect Neighbor.
Okay, we can
Yet
talk
yet
Perfect
another
Neighbor.
documentary. But I'll let
Yeah,
you
Perfect
start this
Neighbor.
one.
Perfect Neighbor. This is kind of a film that could only be made in the modern age, in that it is a film that is told primarily through police badge cam,
Yep.
which is, there's a couple things I think here and there. I think there might be an interview room, and anyway, all of it is like police video.
Yep.
And it's really fascinating in that you have a string of events over. I don't know what the time period was. It a
About
few
a year.
weeks, a year? Okay,
Yeah. Well,
I knew it was a
it
little while,
starts
but
yeah, I think it opens at like a month prior or something, but the whole thing's been going on for like a year
yeah,
or more.
yeah. So it's a real fascinating film, because it is told almost completely from badge cam, and because cops respond to certain events. There's multiple cops. There's usually different angles. You're getting, or even a cop talking to a neighbor while the other cop is talking to,
Person that calls.
persons. Yeah, so it's a fascinating or film, and I was actually kind of upset that it didn't get the documentary innovative award, or I think Zodiac may have gotten it.
Well, we can talk about that one too,
Yeah, we
which
can
we
talk
will get
about
to.
yeah, we can talk about that one. I just thought it was, as somebody, I've I used to work in news. There you go. There's the fun
There
part.
you go.
Anyway, I did a lot. Body cam is something that has become more and more part of news reporting and transparency and whatnot. Um, So it's always intriguing to see, and this wouldn't, I mean, the fact that they have almost an entire story captured by body cam is both remarkable and kind of sad.
Yeah.
Um, Usually police wouldn't have the full narrative. This one, they have pretty much a full narrative of what's going on because of the number of times they had to respond to a particular neighborhood, and the actions of one particular perfect neighbor.
Yeah.
Um,
Self-described
yes,
perfect neighbor.
yes. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was great.
And can
And
we,
it's, you know,
yeah, well, can we comment on the fact that we're talking, okay, so this is about a fatal shooting,
this
and
is the, yeah,
we're talking about body cam footage.
yeah.
So let's be clear. The cops in this movie are excellent.
Oh,
That
yes.
they are excellent police officers in this film. Um, so if you're thinking this is some police hit piece, you are incorrect.
No, I mean, it's a complicated situation where what could they have done? Because more often than not, a lot of, reasons they were called out to this particular neighborhood weren't for actual crimes. It
Yeah,
was more for
interpersonal
maintaining.
disputes.
Yeah, yeah. It was things where they'd be like, "Oh, settle down." They're kids. Basically, you have a woman who complains about there's noisy kids in the neighborhood. Um, and she particularly doesn't like a couple kids, or at least it seems like she singled out a couple kids more so than others.
Yep.
And they're just kids. They're, maybe a little snotty, but most kids are.
It's
Um,
yeah, it's funny how that works.
but they're primarily just kids in this neighborhood, and this woman has it out for them, and so everything that they do that she perceives as wrong, she calls the cops. But as we get deeper in the story, it's more and more about her, and whether, yeah, it's there's a lot of questions about what she actually believes, what her motivations are, and that sort of things. And because we're not inside her head, it's hard to know exactly what is driving a lot of the things that she does. She ends up doing some stuff that gets her in trouble, that
Yep.
that has nothing to do with the kids. um yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, but yes, it unfortunately, if you follow the news, it's a landmark case in the stand your ground, um in Florida, sort
Yep.
of, when does it apply, when does it not apply. um and so it's a tragic film as well, partially because you would, again, if you're a police officer, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, and that's what, again, what is interesting is how well the cops come off. And on Stand Your Ground, generally speaking, I support the concept of standing your ground, or the castle doctrine, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that in this case, if there's not the history of this case,
Yeah.
the charges in the trial might go in a completely different direction.
Yeah,
But
it's possible, but but yes, but because of, yeah, there are things. The trial is probably not the most interesting, or but the end, when everything's kind of put out on the table, is
right,
probably not the most interesting bit, because it's not nearly, well, I didn't find it nearly as compelling as the early stuff, but
no, yeah,
you have to show the aftermath and whatnot as well in
yes,
this. But no, I thought I thought it was inventive. I thought it was, I don't know how many hours that they had to dig through to do that. You typically, I can tell you, when they release badge cam, it's usually like 15 minutes long, and about 3 to 5 minutes of it is actually
relevant.
worth relevant or worth watching. A lot of it is them just pulling up to the scene, walking up to the, whatever,
Yeah,
it's there's not a lot there, usually. But excuse me, they cut a lot of stuff here together that works extremely well. You get the full story. You get the cast of characters. You know, yeah, and it's definitely not a knock on the cops.
no,
Because I guess you could be a little irrational and say that, well, they should have known this was coming, but no, but nobody could have predicted that it
No,
would go the way that way.
99.9999% of this is just normal neighbor shit.
Yeah,
Pardon my
and
French.
in most cases, that's how it plays out. In this
Yeah.
case, it just happened to play out in a much different way.
Hey.
Um, yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I don't know that I enjoyed it as much as I appreciated and found it to be a really well crafted film.
Yeah, it was the fact that they were able to put it together so well was good.
Yeah.
That said, you said that did not win
No, it was
the award.
Yeah, and anyway, do you want to talk about Zodiac?
Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. One of our fellow critics, Scott, watched Zodiac Killer Project before the festival started. And he asked me if I was going to see it. I said it's on my list. And he said, I'll be interested to know what you think of it. And that told me right there that it's going to be one of those movies that, I mean, it's not, some genre splitting event, but you're either going to like what this movie is doing or you're not going to like what this movie is doing. It's a documentary about a guy
sort of
who thinks he's going to make a movie
yes,
based on a book written by a guy who investigated the Zodiac killer and in the book he says he's trying to prove the case that it's this person.
Yeah.
So he's talking to the family of the man who's dead. And he starts scouting out things, and then all of a sudden they say, no, you don't get to make the movie.
Yeah, so the rights went somewhere else.
The rights went somewhere else. So Zodiac Killer Project is a documentary of the movie that he never got to make. So it discusses, in general, because he can't quote the book because he doesn't own the rights. He has to be careful what he does and says, but he talks about how the movie would have played out. He talks about, and the thing that Scott loved about it, which I actually did too, is that he talks about, and right here we would have had this, this true crime montage of opening credit things, and this part, and in every part of the movie, he's talking about, he relates it to something that's in like a thriller fiction movie or, a 48 hours investigation.
A lot of other documentaries.
Stylistically, how things kind of play out. And as you're watching it, you hear him tell you, even before the examples pop up on the screen, you know exactly what he's talking about. So it's almost more a deconstruction of true crime cinema than it is the story of the movie he didn't get to make. And so in that way, very loosely, I compared it in my head to a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune.
Okay.
Which is kind of the same. Anyway. I do too. Don't get me wrong. However, it's kind of the same concept.
Sure.
It's a documentary about a movie that he wanted to make, but didn't or couldn't. So it was interesting, except in Jodorowsky, he goes, and this is what people normally do, but I was just going to throw that out the window and do this other thing.
Yeah.
So, but the approach to giving you the story is exactly the same, or the situation behind it is exactly the same. But the approach they were going to take on their projects were completely different. But that was the first thing that popped in my head. I was like, it's kind of like Jodorowsky's Dune. But it's an interesting construction and a way to talk about a story because he still tells the story, but it's in a completely, two steps removed kind of way. So he's actually really putting together an interesting film. But as you said, I kind of think that Perfect Neighbor is more innovative. But I think story-wise, this one's probably as good.
I don't know. I found it to be incredibly boring. I don't know.
Because it's a story about a story.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't really care about this movie that he was going to make anyway.
Look,
Um,
we can talk about a movie that I found boring. I don't know if you watched it or not. All I know is that I almost fell asleep, and one of the other guys, actually, I could tell you about two. There were two movies where a gentleman sitting next to me fell asleep and started snoring. So that didn't happen in this one, in the
yeah,
Zodiac
I don't
Killer
know.
Project.
I mean, I guess
It's not a barn burner
no,
by any stretch.
I guess maybe I couldn't tell if he wanted to be critiquing true crime or because he was going to use all these tropes. He
I
was going to,
know.
I mean, so it's kind of like, well, are you
It's
criticizing or are
Well,
you saying
there
that
was a couple of times when he stops and he's talking to his his producer or his sound guy or whoever,
yeah,
because he's just recording in a booth. We see him a couple times. He's just narrating. So, but there's a couple times where it's like he's talking and it's almost like, is this really how they all go? Like it just dawns on him at the time,
yeah,
which is, I mean, it's funny because they're tropes for a reason.
yeah,
It's not a cliche if people don't use it all the time, you know? So but when you're applying it to your own work, I think that it might be kind of revelatory.
sure. I guess when you
So
realize that you're doing whatever you were trying anyway. I don't know.
yeah,
I just didn't find it all that interesting personally.
I found it
Um,
interesting in that regard. The story would have been rather bland and blah, and I probably prefer Fincher's Zodiac.
yeah, well,
So
definitely.
uh,
So
that's
yeah.